Tom Markert is a true Renaissance man. His versatile career combines over 30 years in senior positions at companies like Procter Gamble, Nielsen, and Office Depot. He has served on multiple public company boards, is currently the National President of InfraGard, a partnership between the FBI and the private sector, and has just released his debut thriller, Death Watch. Tom, be very welcome to our show.
First of all, Lisa, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be a part of your show. I love your show, and as a kid who grew up in Syracuse, New York, without very much, I feel really honored and blessed to be on your show. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And I have your beautiful book here today. I'm going to talk about it a lot in other segments. It's really worth reading. And Tom, before we dig into this fabulous book, which I read and highly recommend, I am sure our audience is curious about your collaboration with the FBI. So can you tell us a little bit about what InfraGard is?
Yeah, InfraGard is a fabulous organization. We're actually coming up on our 30th anniversary this year. We were founded by the FBI again 30 years ago as a means for the FBI to better share non-classified information with a vetted American public. And their thinking was really basic and really smart. Through information sharing, the good guys can stay one step ahead of the bad guys. So they have this big pool of information, and they wanted to figure out a way that they could safely share it with the American public. And so we created this InfraGard program where right now we have 40,000 members in the United States who've been fully vetted by the FBI, meaning they've gone through the full background check of the FBI. It takes about 6 months, and they're also all American. They're all American citizens as well. And once you become a member of our program, we then take the information from the FBI and we share it with our members. And it started out 30 years ago, mostly in the information technology space or the IT space, where we were sharing information on cyber crimes, things like that were very big a few years ago. But now, as the remit of the FBI has widened out, we still share IT information, but now we share information on active shooters, on crimes against children, crimes against the elderly, terrorist threats, any information that the FBI has that they deem non-classified, we can then share it with our members. And it serves to keep the American people safer, and it also serves to protect the American infrastructure.
Fantastic. And do they need any kind of training to do this job?
No, it's a volunteer program. And we do offer a lot of training for our members. And one of the things that happens with our membership is throughout the course of a year, there'll be dozens and dozens and dozens of opportunities for them to see more and learn more. Some of the training that we do is in person, where the FBI will come into a big meeting or a small meeting and present on a particular topic. Some of the information is done via webinars and things like that. But there's many ways for them to absorb as much training as they can. And they're really good about it. And then obviously we ask them to take that information and then share that within their circles as well.
And talking about your book, it has so much of everything related to what you're talking about. Death Watch definitely feels ripped from headlines. It has a mind reader, a bomb in an airport, and a presidential front runner in danger. What else do you guys want, right? So, Tom, what was the spark for this story? And how much of that is rooted in real fears that you can see in your InfraGard work?
Yeah, I mean, I've come to see a lot of this working with InfraGard and working with the FBI. You do get exposed to a lot of different things, and as somebody who traveled a tremendous amount in my career, I mean, I was on an airplane pretty much every day for 40 years in my corporate career. I know all about the ins and outs of airports, their vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, what they're all like. So it was pretty natural for me to create an incident at an airport where I really introduced this new character to the world, who turns out to be a hero. But without giving away too much of it, it's these are topics that I know a lot about, and I tried to use as much of my internal information as I could share to make this as real an experience for the readers as I could.
Yeah, we can tell you're not just imagining threats. As National President of InfraGard, you are in the room where the government and private sector talk about such subjects. So, what did you learn there that you thought you absolutely had to get into this thriller? Without spoilers, just a general line for the public to be more curious.
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say, honestly, our law enforcement is they're heroes. They just are, and they risk their lives and they do incredibly heroic things all day long. And when they wake up in the morning, they literally never know what they're going to face in the course of a day. And that's the case in this story, by the way, as well. I mean, these are people going about their normal everyday lives, and something really tragic unfolds at an airport, and they're rushed in to try to save as many people as they can, and to figure out what is kind of going on so that they can get the world returned to some safety. So yeah, I used a lot of things that I've learned and I've seen along the way, and I tried to make it as real for the readers as it is in real life.
And it was very interesting that from that single accident at the airport, it spirals into a full conspiracy that climbs all the way to Washington. So, from your vantage point, what do people misunderstand most about how vulnerable or how resilient our systems truly are?
Well, we are vulnerable, and the one thing, Lisa, I'd point to that we do a lot with the FBI is active shooter training. And it used to be a few years ago, you might hear about an active shooter once a month.
Mhm.
And now it's pretty much every day where you hear about active shooter situations. And one of the things that I've learned along the way is that through some training, you can you can increase your chances of getting out of those situations pretty dramatically. And I'll give you two instances where active shooters touched my life personally. My sister was caught in an active shooter situation in a mall in Syracuse, New York. She got out, and my niece was caught in an active shooter situation at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, a couple of years ago. And when you talk to people who've gone through these situations, when they start to happen, you're terrified and you don't know what to do. But if you've taken some training, and the FBI offers a program called Run, Hide, Fight, you have some training about what to do. And Run, Hide, Fight is the order in which you should approach an active shooter situation. Run means if you hear gunshots, if you can, run in the opposite direction and get away. Hide doesn't mean crawl under a desk. Hide means get into a closet, push the soda machine up against the closet door and barricade it, and hide in a closet. And then fight is the last thing that you would want to do, but you might have to do it. And in the course of the training, they'll show you common everyday items that you can find in an office or a school that might be a really good weapon. And everybody thinks about what might be there that you could fend off a terror incident with. Well, a fire extinguisher is one of the best things you can find, and they're readily available. Yes, you can always bop somebody with it, but better yet, spray them in the eyes, and it blinds them, and it might give you enough time to get safely away. So this training that the FBI provides, it's amazing for your safety. And I'll just go back to my niece that was caught in the one in Charlotte. I asked her what was going on in the classroom, and she said, "Uncle Tommy, nobody knew what to do, and we just sat there." And that's not what you want to do. You don't want to do that. And and if she had been trained, I'm sure they would have tried to barricade the door to the classroom, or find weapons or figure out a way out. But training for these situations it's everything. And if we were all in those situations, we'd all panic. But if you're trained, you might get out okay.
Wow, this is so relevant. And this kind of training would be something available for the general population or just for groups like the one you are part of?
No, we make it generally available. We're organized in chapters around the United States. So we have one chapter around each of the 76 major FBI field offices around the states and Puerto Rico. And those local chapters are the ones that organize these trainings. And if someone wants to reach out to me or to any of the chapters, we can definitely arrange it. Like I said, we do all flavors of it. We can do in-person training. We bring in the FBI to do it, or we can do the training, on the web as well. So whatever way is best for the viewers, we'll make it happen for them. And we love doing that training. And the training comes in other flavors as well. I mean, human trafficking is a big issue right now. And, training people on what to look for to be good eyes and ears for the FBI and other law enforcement agencies is absolutely critical.
Oh, this is really public service. So definitely, I was going already to advise everyone to visit Tom's page for his book and all the interesting information about himself. And now we can add this so relevant information and available training. So if everybody's interested as I got interested, and I'm sure a lot of people will be. We live in dangerous times and we want to be useful not only for ourselves or for survival, but if we are in a community and sometimes we need to help somebody who cannot help themselves. Being trained makes you fast and efficient. So thank you so much for this information, Tom, and we'll
Of
definitely
course.
put it on your page.
Of course.
Fantastic. Now, safely back to fiction. This fantastic book has the main character, so likable, Samson, who has the gift of foreseeing part of the future. That's not a spoiler. It's in the synopsis. But I loved, Tom, the way you presented that because some readers do not like that old idea of psychics or somebody trying to predict the future in this most supernatural ways. And you found an amazing way to explain his superpowers. You have to read to discover, but it's really fantastic. So, regarding his possibility of the skill to foresee the future, Tom, how much of that echo what it feels like for you to have access to threat briefings, intelligence, and worst case scenarios in real life?
Well, a couple comments I'd make on that, Lisa, is first of all, when I was conceiving the book, I thought long and hard about like psychics. And the harsh reality is that I did some research because I'm a researcher by training, having spent most of my career with Nielsen, the television ratings and market research company. Um, I started asking around like what people's thinking was around psychics and it was very interesting as I asked people. Most people don't really believe in them,
But they go.
but virtually everybody wants to. I mean, they want to. And as I went back and did my homework and looked at some shows and previous movies that were out that kind of dabbled in it, none of them made it believable to me. They were all sort of on the fringe, and it wasn't where I thought it should have been. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about the character and how we could make his abilities much more real to the average person than anybody's ever written before. And I think it came out that way. I mean, I think he comes out as a good guy who's a hero who can occasionally see glimpses of the future. Not all the time, but every once in a while. And I think it's fascinating. And then in terms of the crimes that he gets involved with along the way, yeah, there's a frenetic scene at an airport, and I won't say much more about that. There's a couple of instances where some bad things happen in a park and some bad things happen in other businesses, but I kept it to I tried to keep it as real as I know in my brain these crimes could actually be committed. So there's a lot of realism in it, I think. I think.
Oh, definitely. And I like it much better, despite all the things with the psychics and all. As a writer myself as well, I also work with cinema. Now, here in New York, I'm the curator of the Brazilian Film Festival that takes new directors to Cannes. So we always see new stories. And every time somebody comes with something a bit supernatural, I always warn them to say, make it interesting, make it with this duality. But if sometimes the story is very serious and you put that element, um market research done and by us and other people, they always show there are a lot of people that say, oh, it was going so well until that tarot reader. And
Yeah.
so I'm very happy with the idea you had. It was really very aligned with the rest of the story. Excellent.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write, and it was a lot of fun to see how the characters developed and how they started playing with one another, playing off one another. There's a little bit of romance in there, which is always nice in a book. So yeah, I think it came out. I think it came out really nice, and I hope everybody enjoys it for sure.
I'm sure it's an excellent recipe. And bringing this Renaissance man that you are all together a little bit, you've spent decades in boardrooms and C-suites before stepping into the world of fiction. How did your corporate and board experience shape the way you portray what's in the book? Power, ethics, decision making. How did it affect it, if it did?
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. My story started in college, I would say. You can't tell by looking at me on the screen, but I'm kind of a giant. I'm 6'7".
Ooh.
I know. And I was fortunate enough, I was a pretty good basketball player, so I went to college on a basketball scholarship, which was great. And my aspirations coming out of college, I thought I'd be a coach and a professor. And I ended up being an English literature major in college. And so I always liked reading and writing. That was always something I loved. But I ended up getting recruited out of college by Procter and Gamble, and I went to work for them like right out of college. So I got right into the corporate world like day one, and I spent time at Procter and Gamble. I was at Citi Corp for a number of years, and then I ended up at Nielsen, the television ratings and market research company, and I spent 27 years with Nielsen. I worked in their US company for a long time. I was also president of Nielsen Canada. I was CEO of Nielsen Australia, New Zealand. So we lived overseas for a long time. And then I came back as the global chief marketing officer. So I had the good fortune of um, seeing the corporate world internationally and domestically, which very few executives get to experience that. So I was very fortunate, and then I moved over to Office Depot, where I was the chief marketing officer for about 5 years. So I was in the office supply business for quite a long time, and then I got on a board track as well. I was on the board of directors of True Value and the board of directors for State Auto Financial Corporation. And then about a couple of years ago, I stepped away a little bit and really focused on the work I was doing with InfraGard, and really started writing again, which I loved. And I obviously got this novel done, and I've got 3 movie scripts that are done too, and I'm in the process of showing those around Hollywood right now as well.
Fantastic. And funny, we have some things in common in terms of, except for the sports, I was never involved professionally in sports, but as a young woman, my goal was to be in the literary, completely fiction
Yep.
writing since I was a kid. Uh,
Yep.
of doing several contests and professors always encouraging me. I won some awards in Brazil, Portugal, and then, but it was so funny because in those days, at least, I'm in my 50s now. So they said, oh, either in Portugal or in Brazil, you're not going to make any money with that. Oh, you may end up working in television, but still, blah, blah, blah. So my father gave me wonderful advice in the occasion. He said, you love this, go to college, study that, but do something else to manage your money and your things, because sometimes
Right.
artists, they say they never make money because they don't know how to manage. So what I did is I studied literature and photography first, then I went to business school. And just like you, out of business school, I was picked there for a great job in the biggest telecommunication companies in Brazil in the occasion, worked there for several years, then
Yep.
worked for another consulting firm in São Paulo, and then went to the US and worked for over 10 years in an oil and gas company, traveling all over the world. So but
Wow.
I loved the writing and the photography, and I knew I would return to that. And I didn't want to wait until then. So all along, I was always writing and always doing the photography, always in this. The photography for me was in the storytelling business, fine art and stuff. And
Uh-huh.
it was really a good experience until I got to a point of my plan that I said, now I can retire from corporate and do what I want. So in the past 7, 8 years,
Love it.
I'm in TV, cinema, and book writing again. But
That's
so
great.
I so understand this and the Renaissance idea, all of us fans of the Da Vinci's of the world. I do believe you can be a great engineer and paint the Mona Lisa. You just have to devote equal amounts of time to do both and not do one as a hobby. You need
It's
to take it
so
serious,
true.
isn't it?
So true.
Yeah.
So
So,
true. And writing, look, I love writing, so for me it's pleasurable.
mhm.
I have other friends that write and it's work for them. They just, it's kind of like I'm glad it's not that way for me. I just sit down and I enjoy it. So it's not painful for me. So I'm lucky.
Same way. So wonderful. So, talking about the subject, some of our audience members are writers as well. And as I said, we have a segment here for authors. So, would you please tell us about your creative process? Do you work with outlines? You write as inspiration hits, a pencil, or how long more or less took you to finish Death Watch?
Yeah. My high school English professor is probably going to scream at me when he sees this. I don't write with an outline, and I have a lot of friends that do. For whatever lucky reason, the ideas just work in my head, and I tend to be a person that writes chapter by chapter in a book. I have a pretty good vision in my head of where I'm going to go. I do take twists and turns, like I'm sure you do along the way as you start to write. You find a better path. But I don't write with an outline. Um, I tend to write multiple things at the same time. I mentioned to you that I have this book and I have 3 movie scripts that are done.
Yes.
I tend to move around a little bit. They're all different. But I do tend to move around when I get a little tired of one, I just move to the other one and then kind of come back. Um, but probably all in all, it took me 2 years to write Death Watch and the other 3 movie scripts. It's probably taken me that long. And I obviously Death Watch was my furthest along. So I've put more time into that than I have with the scripts recently. But yeah, it's probably like 2 years, which seems like a heck of a long time. But as you know, that's what it takes.
Well, sometimes the process, sometimes you take a while to write and then a trillion revisions. So
Yeah.
revisions are also important. Hemingway used to say that how many you do doesn't matter. You have to do it until the words feel right. I totally believe in that. I don't think rewrite is a job either. I tend to, if I write several things at the same time, I lose track because I also don't do outlines. I need to know how the book ends for some reason. Then I marinate the process in my head about how that should go. And I sit to write when it's more or less like a story somebody told me long ago, and I don't remember everything. I
Yep.
know how it ends, I know more or less, but it sounds real. Then I
Yeah.
sit and write for a month or two, put it all on paper. It's the first draft, it's not to show anybody. but the whole story is there. It's just like just to put my memory in place. And then it can take a year revising. Not only words, grammar, nothing of that, not blueprint. It's just like really, does it make all the sense that initially made for me? And that's when you rewrite a chapter. Sometimes you know somebody dies, but by the time I show it to an editor, I killed that guy with a gun, with poison, and I slapped him to death. So it's just like in that first draft, I just kill him because what matters is the consequence of the killing,
Yeah.
or who's going to get caught or not.
The other thing I would say is
Uh-huh.
don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh yeah.
Um, when I did my first two books with HarperCollins a while back, and those are the first two that I did, and I didn't really understand, what an editor really does. And when the book got done and, Harper bought it and turned it over to their editors, I didn't know what to expect coming back. And I was just blown away. They came back and they cleaned things up and they suggested some other chapters and they suggested some things that maybe I want to get rid of. I mean, they were really, really good and they really helped fine tune it. And on Death Watch, I worked with Candy Cross, who I think you're familiar with, who has a company called You Talk, I Write. And I've known Candy for a while, and I asked her to go through my book. And what she ended up doing for me was remarkable. She looked at the book in totality, but she made my female characters so much more believable than I did. And I fault myself as a human being. I'm kind of a guy's guy, and I probably represent guys better than I do girls. But she came in and she cleaned up the female characters and made them so much more interesting and more believable than I could ever do. And I think you can't be afraid to ask for help because we're all just humans.
Yes, and an editor has an eye of the outsider, but also with so much experience, and
Oh
they
yeah,
know books similar to yours, so they know what to do to differentiate yours
they're
in
so good.
very productive way.
They're
Wonderful.
they're so good.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you also a question about your previous book that you just mentioned. You were successful writing business books before, like You Can't Win a Fight with Your Boss and 55 Other Rules for Success. It was very successful. And I would like to ask you about the difference, not only in process, but if there was one fiction or non-fiction that you enjoyed writing more than the other.
Well, the business book that was my first one, You Can't Win a Fight with Your Boss. I wrote when we were living in Australia, and I had not fairly recently had become president of Nielsen Canada, which is a big jump for anybody in the corporate world to go from a director or a VP to running a country is a big jump. And then I got promoted again to run Australia, New Zealand, and along the way. Um, I made mistakes along the way. I really did. Like some were not obvious and some were stupid. But there was a part of me that always loves to give back. And I thought, wow, this could be kind of fun to poke fun at myself where I made mistakes and should have been a little smarter. And I wrote that collection in hopes that I could give it to younger executives and they could read it and maybe get ahead in their career a little bit more quickly. And it did catch on. The book did exceptionally well, and it's not a very big book, but it was fun to write. It was, looking back at the mistakes that I made along the way, and things that I learned along the way that might help a younger person. And I did a follow up to it too, and I love the nonfiction. But I will say I really like the freedom that fiction gives you. You can go in a lot of different directions, and you just got to just sort of be thinking about, will this be interesting to my reader? And if you can meet that criteria, you're good.
Tom, we can see clearly that you are a man involved in a lot of interesting activities that demand a lot of focus and a lot of your time. For people who are here living abroad, trying to also manage their time efficiently and have different performance, good performance in different areas, what would you recommend in terms of administration of time for you to be able to devote yourself to interesting activities and have a good performance?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say a couple things worked really well for me. I got into the corporate world and things worked really well for me. And I progressed through the corporate world relatively quickly. And I would say that one of the reasons that that happened is I was willing to do things that a lot of people were not willing to do. That's just a harsh reality. Um, I was willing to travel a lot, and be away from home a lot. And, I pretty much lived on an airplane for 40 years, three, four, five flights a week. When I was with Nielsen and, they asked me to go to Canada and then Australia, New Zealand, and, we spent 7 or 8 years outside of the United States. There were very few people at Nielsen that were willing to do that because it's a big deal. I mean, we had 4 kids. I was very fortunate that my wife was amazing taking care of the kids and making sure they got through school and all of that stuff so that, while I was at work, I could really focus on work because I knew everything at home was really good. So one of the things I would challenge, your listeners is when you're thinking about your career, if you are willing to make some sacrifices that others are not, it does open a heck of a lot of doors. And that certainly was true in my business career. I fell into InfraGard kind of by luck. I was approached in South Florida by one of the board members a bunch of years ago and got interested in what InfraGard was. And I filled out the application and waited 6 months and then got involved. And eventually I ran the Southeast chapter for InfraGard. And then a few years ago, they asked me to run InfraGard nationally. And that took time. That took, most of the meetings were in the evening, but you had to give up some time to make that work. But that's worked really well for me. So I would say getting ahead takes a lot of luck and it takes a lot of skill. And it in my case, I am a person who tends to put in long hours but I'm really happy doing what I'm doing. And I wouldn't change anything at this point.
And finally, Tom, if a business leader or a city official or even an everyday reader finishes that watch and thinks, I should be doing something different, what's the one mindset shift or action that you would hope they would walk away with?
Well, a couple things on that front. Number one, I would hope that no matter what the source is, if there is intelligence out there that there's danger in a particular area, that you listen to that source. I mean, it's true enough. And if law enforcement tells you to do something, just by gosh, do it, and don't second guess it, and just move along quickly because our world is moving so quickly right now. So I would say the big thing is no matter what the data is, consider it and don't just push it aside. And I think, I'm also in the political world as I'm a sitting city commissioner right now. And you do see things in politics that you see on TV, and a lot of them are true. There is corruption and there's strange things that go on. And I can only imagine what goes on in US elections. Um, but be aware of it, be aware of things that are going on around you and be aware of your surroundings would be, some advice I would give anybody right now, anywhere in the world. Be aware of your surroundings.
Tom Markert, what a fun educational interview. It was a great pleasure to have you in our show.
I'm so thankful you had me on. I feel very blessed that you invited me into your show, and I hope we can do more in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Our global audience, please visit Tom's page on our website for his social media and all his information. And I read and highly recommend that watch. Super quick paced, wonderful plot. You can't put it away. So check it out.